I'm Martin Smith. I'm the CEO of United Global Co-Opportunities. We're a Kentucky-based company. We work on agricultural products, new commodities that can be implemented with new technologies, and to replace the tobacco crop and utilize the labor that's associated to that production to open up the opportunity for ownership and future production. And so that's one of the models that we do with Knaf. Knaf is a hibiscus plant out of South Africa that has been brought here to America previous to me having the opportunity to work with it. But when I started looking at commodities to bring to the tobacco farmers of Kentucky to replace the tobacco crop and to save the small family farmer and to create economic development that would restore the family's opportunity to flourish in a small farm community or on a small piece of parcel of ground. And so we brought the Knaf here. It's spelled K-E-N-A-F. Again, it's a hibiscus plant. There's no legal limits to what Knaf can do in the United States or around the world. And so we're looking at it as a company. We've been growing it for many years here in America. We're feeding livestock with it. We are looking to making textiles, woven and non-woven materials. Also, there's about 25,000 products around the world that have been created from it. Now we're looking as a U.S. company to look at technology that can use this crop as well as add value to it on the farm so that the farmer has a valid place in the marketplace and he owns his production value of his crop. And so we do that in many ways. Another way is through energy production, through liquid fuels, looking at creating local liquid fuel production as well as generating electricity on what we call the worldwide microgrid. And that's utilizing technology to create energy from this crop to be utilized in many levels of processing, whether it be on the farm, he could use his electricity there or his liquid fuels there, or distributing that energy or fuel locally. And so today I want to introduce to you the Center for Economic and Social Justice, Dr. Norm Kurland's president, and also Equity Expansion International's board of directors. What's your position there?
Managing director.
Managing director. And so I'll let you explain a little bit about what those roles entail and what the vision of the organizations are.
Right. The Center for Economic and Social Justice is a all-volunteer, nonprofit organization mainly dedicated to teaching economic justice, the principles of economic justice, the principles of social justice that can empower every citizen with respect in economic terms so that they're not dependent on the state, but the state becomes dependent on the citizens. So we do that through ownership. I was one of the pioneers, worked with the man who developed the employee stock ownership plan. I was a lawyer and an economist by background, coming out of the Chicago School of Economics, and have done work in many areas. The ideas of Kelso and the employee stock ownership plan are now being implemented in about 10,000 companies with over 10 million American workers. We were able to find a champion on Capitol Hill, Senator Russell Long of Louisiana, who then headed up the Senate Finance Committee. And we sat with him, Kelso and I, for 4 hours one evening. And in fact, he picked up the bill at a restaurant, one of the more expensive restaurants in Washington. And he agreed that this was an idea whose time has come. And he liked it, and as a result, we were able to get, I wrote the first employee stock ownership plan laws, and it was signed by President Nixon on January 1st, 1974. And then we had in the Employee Retirement Income Security Act for the retirement plans, Senator Long was able to get special features for employee ownership as a financing tool, as a way in which propertyless people could acquire ownership up to 100% of the company without putting up their own money. It's done on credit, and that credit is repaid in the full stream of profits of the company. As a matter of fact, we can
future profits.
Future profits, and the way it can be designed under today's ESOP laws, a company could eliminate, if it's 100% owned by its employees, it can eliminate all of its state and federal income taxes. So there are good features in it. And as a result of that, you're able to go to a bank, and banks make loans. You can get up to 100% of the loan and repay it in pre-tax dollars. And then it becomes a source of the shares, then become a source of retirement, and also it can become a source of dividend incomes after you pay off.
Not their wage.
Not their wage. It's out of the wage. It says, look, one of the big problems is that we have what's called the wage system. We think that everything is done by labor, but what fascinates me in your work is you see technology as something that can liberate the system from dependency on the wage system into one in which any individual would be able to gain incomes both through their labor, and to the extent that that was displaced by technology, they could gain incomes from ownership. And that's what America's all about.
So allow technology to advance on behalf of the owners of the technology being a participant. Right.
And then the other company is what we call an investment banking firm for the 99% of the world.
Absolutely.
We say, okay, Wall Street, we'll compete with you. We can put together ESOPs, and I have done 100% leveraged ESOPs. They work. I did one in Egypt for a major, for the Alexandria Tire Company some years ago, in which the employees became owners without putting up any money, borrowed money. And we see the world is ready for this idea. There are a number of countries, I know the UK and South Africa, a number of other countries have laws in which employee stock ownership plan financing can be implemented. So what I see in what you're doing is you're bringing a technology that the world needs. I like technology, and I like the fact that it can be owned as a fundamental human right by every child, every woman, every man. We can begin to say we have to go beyond the wage system, the welfare system, the charity consumer debt, where people are now becoming enslaved by the present system, and that totally violates the original American dream, and we want to restore that dream.
So interacting with the technology that allows people to become owners through the benefits of the technology, they own the production that comes from that, right?
Exactly. If you're an owner, most people think that property are the things you own. That's not true. What property is a set of rights, the rights of an owner, and both in terms of control and in terms of who owns the fruits. If you own an apple tree and someone else takes your apples, they've stolen from you. They've taken from your rights. It isn't that property is an unlimited right. You can't use your property to harm another. So we have to begin educating people as to what property is, and then make it available through the laws, through changes in federal laws particularly, and in the tax system. We need a simple tax system that would balance the budget, would eliminate the deficits that are preparing to bankrupt America. So we have to move, we have to find solutions that are not left, they're not right, they're the high middle ground.
I couldn't agree with you. In this election, the 2016 election is coming up, and as as somebody who is very in tune with economic development and global and the position that America has in its standing, an opportunity to lead in productive behavior and creating another stream of income for the family.
Exactly.
You know, I'll deal with the small family farmer because it's a total family unit, and it's a unit that's productive where they are. And I think the model of what we're talking about here, looking at, you know, the future, would we want our people to be always chasing a wage, or participating in the workforce and being able to be compensated for their ownership, on the ownership
exactly
side?
and it's very important. See, we take it that the beginning of society is the individual human being, and each human being should be treated with equal dignity and be provided with equality, not of results, but equality of opportunity to develop to their fullest extent. And so we're talking about how do you structure, how does government lift the barriers that exist? Not government telling people how to live their lives, but rather lifting the barriers to freedom, to opportunity. This is, again, it's not left or right. It is really based on the fundamental premises of the founders of this country.
I'm so glad that we got back to that, because, you know, I believe that if you were to poll the world, not just America, but the world, they would agree that America needs to find itself.
And you see, you put your finger on it, Martin. People ask the question, would you rather own or be owned? You see,
yeah.
And if people start thinking about it, they would say, well, I don't want to be a slave, but that's what the world is moving toward.
When we look at tyranny and the lack of opportunity, creating tyrannistic, you know, threats on humanity, this is the opportunity for us to address ourselves in a way that all peoples can fight from within the will of wanting to do better, live good, live properly without the distraction.
Exactly. I was in the military in Strategic Air Command at one point, and that was during the Korean War. And we had the capacity to destroy nations, and so did the Soviet Union. Good thing is we never really fought them, and I don't think we should ever have to use the atomic weapons. But now we find that non-state groups like ISIS, the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, their intent, they consider America the great Satan nation, that we are the source of everything that's wrong in the world. Well, I think America has moved off its original path, and we have to restore it. Not only restore it, become the model that every nation in the world will have to copy. That's the best. It isn't, if you want to win a war, it isn't with the war technology. We're in a war of ideas, and we need to restore the original American idea and make sure that the system does it. Now, one of the big problems is that you got a great divide in terms of who owns.
That's right.
Okay, and in this, if you look at the world, the top 67 people, the richest 67 people, own more than the bottom 3.5 billion people. Now, even in America, you find that a fraction of 1% own more than the bottom 90%. And most of the bottom 50% own nothing. They owe more than they own, and certainly the poor. And we don't want to talk about let's have a middle class society. We're talking about how do you have an economically classless society where every human being is important, and the system encourages them to develop to their fullest extent. And now, if I look at the problem, it's in the money system. Money no longer is a way in which you can measure value. Right? At one point, we used to use gold. But at this point, the Federal Reserve, which has the power to do things right, to help local banks to finance growth of industry, agriculture, commerce.
Right.
It's in the Federal Reserve Act, Section 13.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we have to do is go back to the original understanding of money. What is money? First, you have to understand what money is. You know, it's what's called a medium of exchange. It's anything that can be used to satisfy a debt is money.
Right.
Barter, where you trade
Sure.
in one thing, it's supposed to be of equal value. Well, right now, money is not
like
backed by assets as it was supposed to be, where you could find, if you provided something, you expect to get something immediately or in the future from real production.
Right.
That would, okay. But that isn't the case anymore. That's why the gap keeps widening, and that's why many people turn to government to redistribute income. That's why the wage level, when I was a kid, the hourly wage system was 25 cents an hour.
It's a big far cry
for
from labor
gasoline.
today.
No, gasoline was 10 cents an hour, but the minimum wage was 25 cents an hour. You see, and the thing is, supposing Roosevelt, instead of listening to Keynes, where the government could come in and change the value of money, listen to other economists who are saying, no, there are better ways to restore health to the private sector. There was a man who headed up Brookings Institution for 25 years, Harold Moulton, Dr. Harold Moulton. He was saying, you can finance, you want to finance not out of past savings, but out of future savings.
Right.
Because if you do it out of past savings, that should be used for consumption. And if you have an economic system, there are only two sides. It's one is consumption. You don't produce what if there aren't consumers, and you can't consume unless there's production. But you got such a disparity now, where the bulk of the wealth, of the incomes, and the future ownership, and it keeps increasing. It's if you look at, some people have done a graph, and it's like this, starting all the way, and then if you're thinking of a 100-yard line, it's around the 99th yard is when it starts to climb, and that's what's happened in this country. And I say that the money system is doing that. It is out of hand. The policies of the Federal Reserve, as encouraged by the policy of the Congress and the President, are doing it wrong. And so we do need new leadership in this country who will say, hey, look, this is not monopolistic where a few own. It's not collective ownership where the state owns, but rather, how do we build a system based on private property rights for every citizen? And if you go to it's very interesting. In '47, after the war, they passed what was called, the UN passed something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in that, Article 17 says, everyone should have the right to own property, individually, personally, as well as in association with others. Well, that's what we're talking about. And then it also says you can't use your property to hurt other people. So there's a limit. But the point is, the opportunity should be provided by government. And government is standing in the way. It has blocked, and we need to change government policy so that the Federal Reserve would go back to the power it has to finance growth through the local banks. And that way, in ways in which the citizens would be able to purchase new shares. The corporations, they could eliminate the corporate profits by paying out dividends if dividends were tax deductible. But right now, the tax laws encourage them to keep their profits within the company. They don't have to go to the shareholders. As a matter of fact, they use the profits that have accumulated to buy out shares in order to get the prices high. Well, this is Wall Street. And I say let Wall Street maintain itself as a gambling casino. It is a gambling. It's dealing with speculation, and when they make mistakes, they shouldn't come to the government, and the government bails them out or purchases bad mortgage loans that were made. That again, it was government policy encouraging people to buy property well over their heads. It's a disaster. So what we're talking about is, how can we correct the system? The system was not created by God.
Right.
It was created by people.
We have a responsibility, don't we? I mean,
and
think about
therefore, and exactly,
can't turn it loose and just
exactly, we can't let the people who control money control the system. Rather, we can say, look, you on Wall Street, the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor should have equal opportunity every year to get a piece of the growth pie, which is roughly about $7,000 per man, woman, and child.
As it is
in
today.
This, as it is
the
today.
projection that we are.
That's right, and it's a slow growth economy. Well, we want to be conservative. If every man, woman, and child could get $7,000, go to their local bank, they could buy newly issued shares because the corporations would want to issue dividend there to eliminate their corporate tax. In that way, the future profits would flow out to pay off the loan and thereafter become an income source. And we did some calculations, again, using conservative figures, that a child born today would, by the time they reached age 65, they would have about $46,000 after taxes, because we said here is how the tax laws should be changed. So, but they would have to pay taxes, and they would have about $460,000 in accumulated assets. Well, you don't need Social Security at that point.
Sure.
You see, and during the child's life, and this takes place gradually, but it builds up so that from birth to 65, and it doesn't stop at 65, but from birth to 65, they would have received, our calculations were about $1.5 million of after-tax dividends. That way, you know, instead of people being burdens on other people, the next thing is now children.
People be looking at how to make them productive. The next generation, how do we make them productive?
And that's right. And to the extent that they may work fewer hours or fewer years in their life in doing economic work, they could be into creative work, which you would do if you had the income.
If you had the time.
Like politics. In other words, politicians
would be running for money.
Exactly, they wouldn't be running for Wall Street money. They wouldn't be looking to become president because the big money guys are able.
We hope that isn't the case, right? Moving forward, we hope that these changes make that
when your farmers and the citizens of all the states that you're going to be operating in begin to see, you know, why not? What's wrong with what they're saying? And I maintain, I can't fight. It wasn't my idea.
Just say this. How about what? Let's just put it in real coin figures. If a farmer, since we just talked about farmer, but this is all citizens would have this opportunity. Citizens to go to their local bank and to look at buying shares and then what would they do if they are a farmer and this is an opportunity?
Oh.
What would you do with our technology? What would you do with advancing technology?
But you have it. You see, this is what I like. You see, you're looking at business the way all businessmen should look. But unfortunately, so many are miseducated because academia doesn't teach these principles that we have to operate on a sense of justice. And by the way, I didn't tell you what we think. A lot of people think when you use economic justice and you use terms like social justice, it must be socialist or communist. No, because what Karl Marx said in the Communist Manifesto.
Right.
He said that you can summarize the entire philosophy. It's in the Communist Manifesto. The entire philosophy in a single sentence. Abolish what?
Private property.
Private property.
Yeah.
And so we're saying, no, it wasn't private property that was the problem. It was the fact that the system was moving toward a monopolistic. The people who were succeeding were able to get laws to protect them against competition. And we're saying, no, you don't. You never want to have a monopoly. The only legitimate monopoly, there is a monopoly. The only legitimate monopoly, and that's the state. And it's a dangerous thing to have any monopoly. Monopolies tend to get corrupt.
Right.
So the only check against the corruption of government power is to make sure that economic power is in the people, not in government.
The economic power is with the people,
and that's property.
And
if you have property, one of the things that you learn in law school, that's one of the basic rights of property. You have control. You're entitled to the fruits.
Right.
Nobody's entitled to take it away from you. Now, in the even to get the system going, what we call the Capital Homestead Act, you say, let's get rid of all the garbage that we have in the tax, all the tax expenditures, which the rich guy or the Wall Street were able to get into the law. Nobody understands the tax law. There are all kinds of special features.
Everybody in the world just
let's get rid of them. Let's get rid of them.
Right.
Let's get rid of them and have the corporations. They could. I'm not saying eliminate the corporate tax completely, but give corporations the incentive to pay out all their profits. Then there's nothing to tax. You see, and you pay out your profits by satisfying a feature of property law is that the owner should be entitled to not 50% of the fruits, or 10% of the fruits, or 90% of the fruits, but 100% of the fruits.
Right.
You see, and then if the corporations want to expand, issue new
shares.
Full dividend payout shares. You won't have to pay any corporate taxes. In the meantime, there's something even significant. If you're going to add the kinds of technologies you're talking about, where you're going to produce more,
that's right.
Well, what's going to happen there is you're going to have customers. You see,
is customers good or what?
Yeah. In other words, you without inflation,
right,
you can grow the economy. When America grows in the way that it was intended by the founders, every country in the world is going to have to copy us.
They'll want to.
And they're going to want.
Right,
but
we're supposed to be in that world.
As I say, we throw money all over the world to help different countries. More important than that money would be teaching them how to grow their economies in ways in which you would have a free market, or what I'll call a non-monopolistic open market system based on property rights, limited economic power of government, and the universal right of everyone to have the means to become an owner.
Right.
You don't have to take. And the one thing you know is that the rich, no matter how many billions they might have, cannot take it with them. They haven't figured out how to
make the transfer.
That's right. So we can encourage in gift tax laws and inheritance laws, no tax on the estate.
Right.
The tax will be for the recipient. If the recipient has, after the gift, let's say you can pick any number, but we say $1 million. Now that is not that's
and
not.
He's got his income already coming through his shares and what he's
exactly,
and he's got his work.
You can take care of every one of your family members. Right. You can take care of the workers who help create.
Because they're all going to have the same benefit of being an owner.
And they're going to be consumers.
And they're going to be consumers.
You see?
Yeah.
You see? And so instead of the answer to the socialists and the welfare state people, and I used to be, before I heard of this idea, it wasn't mine, it was from a man named Louis Kelso, who wrote a book called The Capitalist Manifesto. And I don't use the word capitalist, but anyway, he did it because he wanted to do the opposite of what Marx was doing. And he was the inventor of all the things I'm talking about. These are really expressions of ideas that he has. We have his books you can download free from our website at cesj.org. You know, so if you want to read his books and other books
free
that
downloads.
he's written, they're free downloads, and other books that are important, and testimony and accomplishments that are happening. We have to get this message out to the people because we have a citizenry, as I say, who've been miseducated because nobody in academia teaches economic justice in terms of principle of participation, principle of distribution according to the market, and then what do you do? What's a feedback principle when you make a mistake? How do you correct it?
How do you fix it?
And that's what we mean. Those three principles: participative justice, distributive justice, and social justice meet each of those three principles. And with that, you can have a new politics. Right. You have a politics where instead of empowering the few and enriching the few, you're enriching the nation.
Well, one question for you before we sign off here. If you were to talk to the next leader, of course we have no idea, right, who is going to emerge next as the world's leader. We were all shocked and amazed and about the evolution of Barack Obama coming into the presidency, and I'm not asking any opinions there, but what I would ask you is if you were to talk to the next emerging leader, as it was how for him to address himself to social and economic justice principles, what would you say? What would you say to that person?
Okay, I would say what Ronald Reagan said. Reagan, incidentally, and I'm an independent, but Reagan appointed me as the deputy chairman of the Presidential Task Force for Project Economic Justice. If you go to the video section on our website, you can hear what Reagan says. But you can go back to Lincoln, you see, because Lincoln was very, very important. He was the man who signed the Homestead Act.
That's right.
And that made it possible for propertyless people to go west of the Mississippi, get 160 acres of land, and they also set up the state universities, so that the land-grant universities in the same act. And as a result, you had research, you had education, people, and it was all to help agriculture become more productive.
Making people productive.
And we became the most productive agricultural producer in the world as a result. The problem was that land is finite.
Yeah.
The frontier ran out. I maintain, Lincoln died 150 years ago this past week, was assassinated. I maintain Lincoln knew enough about industry, the railroads.
Sure
it was the beginning of manufacturing in this country. Lincoln would have done the same. He would have authored what we call the Capital Homestead Act, because he would see that he would listen to people like you, the visionaries of technology, and say, my God, wow, let's help. Let's make sure that there's financing for your projects, and the way you would structure it would make a lot of sense. You're talking about co-ops, getting the farmers together to produce a particular product, or maybe more than one product, and even be able to manufacture things with modern technology right on the farm.
Yeah.
And you could have a co-op which would market what's produced from the farms. And then, your company can be the company that helps develop all the technologies for the many products that can be produced from CADAF.
And the international relationships of implementing it,
we could do
because we're making people productive.
Well, I can tell you right now, I met with the president of Guinea, who he liked what we said. Who should own the mineral rights
of
Guinea? I said, should it be outsiders? Should it be the government? Should it be you? Or should it be the people? And he nodded, and we submitted a proposal, and it's being studied there now, in order to start by talking about the ownership by the people. We showed a method by which it could be done.
Well, how does that work, Dr. Kurland? Then, we're talking people, right? So people are universal.
People are people. That's right.
That we all have a transparent breath that we can all identify. You know, people are people. So does that work? What about Israel and Iran and Iraq and Turkey?
Okay.
Yemen.
Okay, this is good. This is a great point. In 1977, I wrote an article. It's called World Citizen News. It was called the Abraham Federation.
The Abraham Federation.
And I proposed that Israel and the Palestinian areas all come together, not to have a Jewish state or a Christian state or an Islamic state, but rather to have one in which all religions can benefit, as Abraham.
Human state.
And it would protect freedom of religion, freedom of belief, as we did in the First Amendment of our Constitution, the Bill of Rights. So that the land of Israel, the Holy Land, would not be owned by the Jewish Trust, but rather by an entity that we would call Citizens Land Bank.
Citizens Land Bank.
You see, and every citizen would have a lifetime, non-transferable ownership, dividend-bearing share in the land, so that when land is leased out, the lease incomes would benefit the owners.
So whoever was the most productive would have the first. Obviously, if the ownership all want that land to be the most productive as it can for all the shares, then it would govern itself to be productive, be ecologically aware of their land.
That's right, and the land was not created by people, and there's no reason that the state should have a monopoly of ownership. Rather, the state is only a tool. It's a social tool. As I said, it's a legitimate monopoly, but it's a monopoly that should be for justice for all of its citizens. If you read the Constitution, it says, we the people, right, in order to form a more perfect union. What's the next two words? Establish justice. Exactly. Yeah. So if they're to do that, you can't establish justice by not giving the people the opportunity to own, and the state becomes the owner.
Right.
But so that's one thing. That's one phase of our program now in Guinea. And also that would have been for the Abraham Federation. At this point, given the world situation, my own attitude is that Israel is worried about about extremism by people who want to impose Islam on the rest of the world, and that includes a lot of Palestinians. Well, our idea is that you may want to start on the Gaza, West Bank, even have East Jerusalem become a global city and the capital of the Abraham Federation. Leave Israel alone for a while. I think Lebanon would join. And I spoke to a former president, Gamayel, about this. He said, this is what Lebanon was supposed to be. And I think Jordan would join, and maybe even Egypt would join, and they'd be the
people. Hold on, let's go back to what we're talking about. And the people
would own the land.
Enjoy.
More than that, they'd own the kinds of technology, the most advanced energy technologies, information technology. But America would help them, would sell them these technologies, or do whatever they can.
Whatever the relationship needs to be to balance.
And then the people would own the technologies and be able to be not only produce for themselves. You could have a superior economy than that of Israel. And at some point, the Israelis would say, okay, we want to join too. And they'd be open. And any Jew who stayed there now, who've gone on the West Bank, okay, you now can become a citizen of the Abraham Federation. So that there are ways of solving global problems, which if we don't solve, somebody's going to be using atomic weapons and other weapons of mass destruction against America.
Yeah,
just what happened in 9/11, 2001, I expect that is possible, even though we're doing all we can to prevent it. But I think we have to be aware that people who hate America and see America as being unjust will do something bad. What do you do if you're in war? You win the war of ideas. Win over the people who are joining in to hate America, to hate Israel, to want to impose their religious feeling on the rest of the world. Well, caliphates, Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No, and I think opportunities, like you say, ideas create opportunities for us to get past these things as humans, And
that's what academia is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about the pursuit of the truth. How can you pursue the truth if you tell people that the reason you go to college, they teach this in universities to get a job, when they go and they have to get a couple $100,000 to be able to get a graduate degree, and then they get their degree, and they find they can't get a job.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is not making sense. We have to teach people that justice, like truth, is essential to be pursued, to be discovered. None of us know perfect justice or perfect truth, but we have to have an approach based on principles in which we can improve on justice in the world and improve on truth. And I don't see academia, I don't see it at all in the leading law schools, the leading universities. Law schools don't teach you justice, they teach you what the law is. But if the law is bad, what good is it?
Well, I think the world would agree with you, and I know young people do, as we've interacted with them.
They're the key.
They really pick up on this, don't they?
When
you ask a young person, your rest of your career, you want to be owned, or do you want to be an owner? And they get it just as soon as as they comprehend it.
And I think what you're doing, reaching out to farmers. There were years ago. This is back at it was 79, just before the elections, 79. The American agriculture movement came into Washington
with
450 tractors. Well, I met with the leaders, and we went to the mayor of Washington. We said, look, you want the farmers to leave peacefully. Farmers are getting ready to really cause a problem.
Right, going to cross the traffic jam with all their tractors.
That's right. So anyway, we got him. The farmers said, that we will leave town, but we want one more demonstration. And so the mayor said, well, what's your demonstration? Well, we want you to release the tractors, and they want to go down Constitution Avenue and surround the Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve?
Yes, because at that time, you see, you had double-digit, this during the Carter administration, you had double-digit rates of inflation, double-digit rates of unemployment, and the farmers, these are the guys who have been in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And they're coming back, they bought these farms, and they had to pay high interest rates, and Carter administration, they eliminated trade to the Russians, and that eliminated a big market for the farmers, so they were going to go bankrupt. So they had a good reason, and they understand one thing about farmers. They understand a lot of things that people don't understand.
A small farmer right now knows these things.
They know business,
farmer, yeah.
And they know money, and they know so. In any
production.
So what happened is the next day, these were all on the mall in front of the Capitol. 450 tractors. They were surrounded by DC Transit buses, and so the mayor said, well, you can have 250 of the tractors.
250 of them.
Yeah, he said. And so the next day, the buses moved out of the way. All 450 went down Constitution
They weren't going to
Avenue.
be stopped, were they? And I hope we don't ever have to do that again. I hope we're doing it celebrating the great yields that these ideas.
But we had a meeting. I was with them. They had a meeting with some of the Fed gurus, and they did nothing. And farmers left town peacefully, never came back. That was a problem. They should have stayed.
They should have stayed.
They should have stay organized,
yeah,
and follow through on what they were demanding, and that would have gotten interest rates down. You know, and ultimately it should be interest free to do it the way we're talking, because it doesn't depend on the savings of the rich.
Right. They can nothing's going to be touched for the rich.
That's right.
It's going to be creating productive future savings for those who participate.
Credit, the right kind of credit, is credit for equity. Because it will always be backed by the future profits.
That's right.
Or else it wouldn't be a feasible type of investment.
Right.
And the banks would recognize that. But we've developed something called the Capital Homestead Act, with a series of things, both credit, tax reform and monetary reform and inheritance law reform and other things, to encourage the use of money to grow the economy and enable every citizen
to be
coming home.
Thank you. Well, this has been Dr. Norm Kurland, and Dr. Kurland, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and really interact with these viewers, because me and you
Okay, good.
that was